It is time for another Play It or Station It. I know it's been a while since I've done one of these episodes, but man oh man guys, David here to talk about Deathloop, since literally no one else is. I understand that it's a little difficult to find a PlayStation 5. They are looking to rectify that, though I can't really speak for them. It's still looking a little dry amongst the stock out here. But if you did manage to pick up a PS5, one of the lucky few, then I'd say you might just be doing yourself a little bit of a disservice not picking up Deathloop, because this will give some legitimate credence to owning that console. Now, I do know that it's available on PC as well, but if you are going the console route, definitely pick up Deathloop, because so far, as it stands, this game is quite something else. Now, for those of you who don't know, as I kind of, played the game, more and more people were coming into my stream saying, what is this game? What is this about? Or I would tell people, hey, I just finished Deathloop. I just played it. I just finished it. This is one of my favorites of the year. What is it about? Well, basically you play as a main character named Colt, who is stuck on an island. Not only is he stuck on this island physically, but temporally he's stuck in the same day. And he learns through investigation and reliving these days that in order to escape, he has to kill 8 targets named Visionaries that roam the island. And they even have their own personal agendas, whether it be for themselves or for the mysterious nature of the island and why it is that the day keeps repeating. All the while, a character named Juliana has her own reasons to keep you, the main character Colt, from breaking said loop. Now, I know, trust me, I am in the same field where I'm feeling a little bit of oversaturation with these time loop games. I mean, we literally had another one earlier this year that I talked about, 12 minutes, and then leading up to this point, we've not only had time looping games, but we have also, like Returnal, but we've also had time looping properties in general, from like TV shows and movies, Russian Doll, Boss Level, Palm Springs, and of course it all stems from the OGs like Groundhog Day and various other kinds of movies like that. And I understand, like I said, we're reaching a saturation point where maybe it's time to kind of give it a rest and move on to the next thing. When it comes to games, however, it does still leave a little bit of extrapolation to be, kind of taken from that well, for really cool game design, for really intricate mechanics and looping mechanics at that, to make a very clever and well thought out video game. And that's exactly what Arcane Studios, the developers behind Dishonored, one of my favorite video game franchises that sadly is now put on hiatus, even though it kind of wrapped up in a very nice little bow. Their next project, however, is now Deathloop, and you can see DNA and mechanics and things like that feel very arcane-y, while at the same time leaning more towards a different flavor of sorts, coming kind of like bringing in this 60s and 70s aesthetic, kind of paying homage to that time period, while at the same time paying homage to other forms of games that have influenced this genre, from the roguelike genre to the first-person shooter to the actual puzzle-solving sort of thing, as well as still keeping one word and one word only at the forefront of the entire thing, and that is fun. It is fun. And I know that at times there have been people bringing the argument that in the favor of fun, they sacrificed smart AI or intricate mechanics or tough puzzles to solve. But again, the entire focus of the game is to make it feel fun, make you feel like a badass, and that was achieved because playing as Colt, going through these different districts, gaining information and knowledge to then utilize and flip on the heads of these visionaries and these NPCs that are trying to stop me, just felt oh so satisfying, especially when the game, again, keeping fun in mind, gives you some cool guns, cool powers, upgrades for the powers, upgrades for the guns, being able to dual wield, do so many things in your favor, where you can either tackle the game head on, or you can then go about it the much more strategic, stealthy way, not just with stealth overall, but also, again, learning about your enemy, going around the environment, being able to kind of bring out details in the environment, read certain documents, and be able to, feel like a badass and play things smarter, not harder, and work smarter and not harder. And by that vocation, you can ultimately make the game difficulty your own. You are the game difficulty. There's never a difficulty setting in this game because it's ultimately up to you to kind of establish that. With that said, I understand that not everyone's gonna probably be in love with how much reading you actually do in this game, which is what made it kind of tough to watch certain other people streamed this game either on Twitch or on YouTube that I knew for a fact were not really big people on like reading things and kind of taking the things slow and methodical. I'm not saying it's slow like Red Dead Redemption 2 slow or a Kojima game slow. I'm talking slow in the sense that you could take on enemies and just start going in guns blazing, but you are going to die, and because of the time looping mechanic, dying is sometimes not going to be the most convenient thing because this will reset your loop and all those things that you work so hard for, whether it be the weapons, the currency you have in this game, which is called Residium, that you can use to either keep weapons across loops or be able to simply just buy new trinkets or be able to unlock certain things and just make your Colt an even better Colt than he was before. You're gonna lose all that shit if you just don't play things smart. So when I saw some of these streamers and these players kind of complain about like, oh, there's too much trading, I'm like, well, I mean, that ultimately falls down to you. You can either make the effort or this game is just not going to exactly vibe for you. So that's something to really be taken a note of. And though the AI for the NPCs may not be the smartest, and at times it does feel like they lack peripheral vision or common sense, that can't 100% be said about the visionaries, because the visionaries themselves, from either the main targets or the character Juliana, who can invade your game either by a AI controlled NPC or a player through online multiplayer, they actually have worthwhile powers to kind of give you something to, think about and be like, all right, there's a little bit of a challenge here, whether it be the powers that they have on them or just the fact that the AI can sometimes be able to flank you and go about things in an organic, natural way that I'm like, all right, dope. That's not to say that the game is 100% perfect on a technical standpoint. Very early on, in fact, the first time I streamed this game, there were a couple of freezes that thankfully unfroze after like about 3 or 4, maybe even 5 minutes of waiting on the game. It was really rather strange to see that happen, but being that we're still within that 1 year kind of window of the PS5's release, that's going to happen. What I unfortunately cannot excuse, despite glitches here and there that made for some funny moments, there was one where some NPCs were just waving at a camera off in the distance in like a row of like 5 that got a good laugh out of me. What didn't get a laugh out of me were some game-breaking bugs that did happen live on stream a couple of times. You can actually see some footage here where one bug erased some Residium that I had saved up, only for me to switch from one point of the day to the next. That is not supposed to erase the Residium, only to then make me go to 0 and not carry it over. The only way that you can erase your Residium is if you loop the day without keeping it or doing something with it. And even then, you're not resorted to 0. You have like a bankable amount, so to speak. And it just brought me down to 0, and I have no clue where that Residium went. Another game-breaking bug pretty much made the menu kind of disappear, but the game still thought that I was on the menu, so I couldn't really butt out of it or X out of it, and I couldn't select anything on the menu, thus technically freezing the game. Even though the cursor was movable and I could see Colt kind of breathing in the background, I couldn't do anything, and this was after a really, really good run. I wasn't exactly on a run where I was about to like beat the game and try to kill the visionaries, but I had learned some vital information. I got some pretty cool powers and upgrades, and it's all for naught because I had to reset the game because this glitch just soft locked it, and there was nothing that I could do about it. And I really treasure my time, not just as a gamer, but just as a person overall. So when something doesn't necessarily respect it, that's kind of an automatic demerit for me. So that's something that I do need to bring attention to with this game because it does have its optimization issues, especially on PC. I haven't played it on PC, but I've heard some people say that the PC port didn't exactly sit well right out of the gate on launch. I think it's been patched since then, but I can't really speak for them, so just a word of caution on that. After completing that campaign, however, there is a multiplayer component that was pretty interesting. Like I mentioned before, you can have Juliana be either controlled by the AI if you want to be offline, or if you do jump online, that Juliana that invades your game from time to time to then stop you in your tracks of trying to break the loop and going through that day cycle can actually be controlled by another player. In turn, you can then be that player to invade other people's campaigns, kind of like in a Dark Souls-y kind of way, and take over Juliana and stop them. And upon doing so, it takes a much more multiplayer-centric approach. You can kill Colt, and in doing so, through various methods and ideas to kind of take down Colt and be smart about it, you gain currency and you get to unlock further powers, further weapons. Everything is in-game, so nothing to worry about as far as microtransactions or anything that has to deal with real-world money. So everything is just centralized on this multiplayer component. And overall, it is fun, especially when you do get the beat or the jump on a Colt that just doesn't suspect you and you're able to utilize your power smart. Juliana has a specific power that lets her disguise herself as a random NPC, so you can catch a Colt by surprise. And it is, in fact, very, very satisfying. It's just a shame that at times the game mode does feel a little battle royale-ish, except you're not going up against 60 other players, you're going up against just one player. And in that regard, it sometimes feels like you can either jump in there and get killed instantaneously because you happen to be going up against a very experienced Colt who has been playing this game for dozens of hours, or it could be battle royale in the sense that if you want to play it strategically, you might actually end up missing each other across the map. Like the Colt that you were tracking down is now where you used to be, so now you're kind of going around in circles, and there were various times where certain matches I'll be like, where are they at? And I'm going through the entire thing, and either it results in either me, the Colt escaping, or an NPC takes him down, and even though technically I won the match, I don't get as many rewards as I did before. And though it didn't happen to the extent that some other people were kind of griping about online, there were a couple of instances of dropped sessions or disconnections. Granted, the way it was kind of presented on screen, couldn't tell if it was because of an internet issue or because the person may have rage quit. Let's just say that the couple of times that I did get a disconnection, it only managed to conveniently happen after having already killed Colt a couple of times and ultimately using up his 2 chances to actually get back into the fight and concluding in a game over. So, can't really speak for all of that. But all of these things kind of combined make me kind of give this impression that with the multiplayer component, it is fun within the moment, especially if you're on the high of just beating the campaign, feeling satisfied with the ending that you received, and wanting to just squeeze a little bit more of that Deathloop goodness out of the game. But it's not exactly the type of multiplayer that's going to keep you coming back for more. With that said, you can tell that the multiplayer was still a very thought of component to the game, but not the main component. The main component is able to utilize the game design and make things feel badass and cool and satisfying within the single player component, playing as Colt, trying to extrapolate more of the story, albeit the story is not exactly the shining presence of this game. Sometimes it could be told a little bit too quickly, especially because of some of the narrative choices or some of the voice talents behind the game. Though the voice work is good, there's times where I feel like they were directed a little too quick. I don't know, mainly from the 2 main characters here, Juliana and Colt, their voice actors. They're good, you can tell that they're good, but I don't know if it was a COVID restriction or some logistics issue where they're just delivering lines to each other way too quickly that I'm like, what's going on? And because of that, there's a little bit of dissonance. Nevertheless, though, you still get the information the way that you're supposed to through the environmental storytelling. It's all told from the first-person perspective, even some of the cutscenes. And leading up to the ending, you still felt like you did your, at least for me, the proper amount of investigation, research, being able to kind of grasp along with the story, along with grasping the mechanics, feeling like a badass, and ultimately molding the perfect loop to break. And ultimately, this was one of the more satisfying experiences of the year thus far, and Deathloop is in fact, for the time being, my game of the year. Though I understand that that bar is not necessarily at its highest peak, considering that, like I mentioned time and time again, 2021 is more so the year that was going to be affected by the pandemic, not so much 2020. So who's to say that maybe other titles I have yet to play through Game Pass or other external sources may be able to push Deathloop or give it some contention. Only time will tell, but for now, this is my #1 game of the year, Deathloop. Let me know in the comments, guys, what's your game of the year so far. And as always, guys, stay safe and stay humble.